evening, good evening. How'd everybody handle this morning? I hope everybody enjoyed working on their own stuff. That was the first day in 10. What are you doing, Dublin? That was the first day in 6 years. I got to sleep into a Tuesday. I slept into 6:01 because I had to get out of bed. I woke up at the normal hours and I meditated and worked on stuff and said, I'm going to stay in bed. And I did till 6:01. So, all right, we're getting ready to get started here. And we'll do something here real quick. All right. So we're on page 102. And we finished up with, but one lesson is sufficient to teach the fox about skunks. Yes. A bullfrog can be caught on a fish hook by attaching a small piece of red cloth or any other small red object to the hook and dangling it in front of the frog's nose. That is, Mr. Frog may be caught in this manner, provided he is hooked the first time he snaps at it. He snaps at the bait. But if he is poorly hooked and makes a getaway, or if he feels the point of the hook when he bites at the bait, but is not caught, he will never make the same mistake again. Have to ask yourself, why is it that we make the same mistake again? Kind of interesting, isn't it? So, the author spent many hours in stealthy attempt to hook a particularly desirable specimen which had snapped and missed before learning that but one lesson in social heredity, that's what we're talking about, is enough to teach even a humble croaker that bits of red flannel are things to be left alone. The author once owned a very fine male Arundel dog, which caused no end of annoyance by his habit of coming home with a young chicken in his mouth. This is pretty cool. This is a great story. Each time the chicken was taken away from the dog and soundly switched, but to no avail. He continued in his liking for fowl. For the purpose of saving the dog, if possible, in an experiment with social heredity, the dog was taken to the farm of the neighbor who had a hen and some newly hatched chickens. The hen was placed in the barn and the dog was turned in with her, meaning put in the stall with her. As soon as everyone was out of sight, the dog slowly edged towards the hen with what? Her baby chicks. Sniffed in the air in her direction a time or two to make sure she was the kind of meat for which he was looking, then made a dive toward her. Meanwhile, Mrs. Hen had been doing the same surveying on her own account, for she met Mr. Dog halfway. Moreover, she met him with such a surprise of wings and claws as had never been experienced. The first round was clearly the hen's, but a nice fat bird, reckoned the dog, was not to slip between the paws so easily. Therefore, he backed up a short distance, then charged again. This time, Mrs. Hen lit upon his back, drove her claws into the skin, and made effective use of her sharp bill. Mr. Dog retreated to his corner, looking for all the world as if he were listening for someone to ring a bell and call the fight off until he got his bearings. But Mrs. Hen caved no time for deliberation. She had her adversary on the run and showed that she knew the value of the offense by keeping him on the run. One could almost understand the words as she flogged the poor Arundel from corner to corner, keeping a series of rapid-fire sounds from which all the world resembled the remonstrations of an angry mother who had been called upon to defend her offspring from the attack by older boys. The Arundel was a poor soldier. After running around the barn from corner to corner for about 2 minutes, he spread himself on the ground as flat as he could and did the best to protect his eyes with his paws. Mrs. Hen seemed to be making an especial attempt to peck out his eyes. The owner of the hen then stepped in and retrieved her, or more accurately, stating it, he retrieved the dog, which in no way appeared to meet with the dog's disapproval. The next day, a chicken was placed in the cellar where the dog slept. As soon as he saw the bird, tucked his tail between his legs and ran for the corner. He never again attempted to catch a chicken. One lesson in social heredity: value the sense via. He never again attempted to catch a chicken. One lesson in social heredity via the sense of touch was sufficient to teach him that while chicken chasing may offer some enjoyment, it is also fraught with much hazard. All these illustrations, which, with the exception of the first, describe the process of gathering knowledge through direct experience. Observe the marked difference between knowledge gathered by direct experience and that which gathered through the training of the young by the old, as in the case of the ruffed grouse and her young. The most impressive lessons are those learned by the young from the old, through highly colored or emotionalized methods of teaching. When the mother grouse spread her wings, stood her feathers on end, shook herself like a man suffering with palsy, and chatted at her young in a highly excited manner, she planted the fear of man in their hearts in a manner which they were never to forget. The term social heredity, as used in the connection with this lesson, has particular reference to all methods through which a child is taught any idea, dogma, creed, religion, or system of ethical conduct by its parents or those who may have authority or influence over it, before reaching the age at which it may reason and reflect upon such teaching in its own way, estimating the age of such reasoning power at, let us say, 7 to 12 years old. There are myriads of forms of fear, but none are more deadly than the fear of poverty and old age. We drive our bodies as if they were slaves because we are so afraid of poverty that we wish to hoard money for what? Old age. This common form of fear drives us so hard that we overwork our bodies to bring them the very thing we are struggling to avoid. What a tragedy to watch man drive himself when he begins to arrive along about the 45-year milepost of life, the age at which he is just beginning to mature mentally. At 40, a man is just entering the age in which he is able to see and understand and assimilate the handwriting of nature, as it appears in the forests and flowing brooks and faces of men and little children. Yet this devil fear drives him so hard he becomes blinded and lost in the entanglement of a maze of conflicting desires. The principle of organized effort is lost sight of, and instead of laying hold of nature's forces, which are in evidence all around him, and permitting those forces to carry him to heights of great achievement, he defies them and they become forces of destruction. The principle of organized effort is lost sight of. And instead of laying hold of nature's forces, which are in evidence all around him, and permitting these forces to carry him, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, to the heights of great achievement, he defies them and they become forces of destruction. Perhaps none of these great forces of nature are more available for man's unfoldment than the principle of auto-suggestion. But ignorance of this force is leading the majority of the human race to apply it so that it acts as a hindrance, not as a help. He defies them and they become forces of destruction. Perhaps none of these great forces of nature are more available for man's unfoldment than the principle of auto-suggestion. But ignorance of this force is leading the majority of human race to apply it so that it acts as a hindrance, not as a help. Let us enumerate the facts which show us how this misapplication of this great force of nature takes place. Here is a man who meets with some disappointment. A friend proves false, or a neighbor seems indifferent. Forthwith, he decides through self-suggestion, all men are untrustworthy and all neighbors are unappreciative. These thoughts so deeply embed themselves into the subconscious mind that they color his whole attitude towards others. Go back now to what was said in lesson 2 about the dominating thoughts of man's mind attracting people whose thoughts are similar. Apply the law of attraction. Wait a minute. They were talking about this in 1925. I thought this was a new thing we learned with The Secret. Apply the law of attraction and you will soon see and understand why the unbeliever attracts other unbelievers. Reverse the principle. Here's a man who sees nothing but the best there is in all whom he meets. If his neighbors seem indifferent, he takes no notice of the fact, for he makes it his business to fill his mind with dominating thoughts of optimism and good cheer and faith in others. If people speak harshly, he speaks back in tones of softness. Through the operation of this same eternal law of attraction, he draws himself to the attention of people whose attitude towards life and whose dominating thoughts harmonize with his own. Tracing the principle a step further, here is a man who has been well schooled and has the ability to render the world some needed service. Somewhere, sometime, he has heard it said that modesty is a great virtue and that to push himself to the front of the stage in the game of life savors of egotism. He quietly slips in the back door and takes a seat at the rear where other players in the game of life boldly step to the front. He remains in the back row because he fears what they will say. Addiction to approval. Public opinion, or what he believes, fear of criticism, in the seven universal fears, fear of criticism. Public opinion, or that which he believes to be public opinion, has him pushed to the rear, and the world hears but little of him. His schooling counts for naught because he is afraid to let the world know that he has it. He is constantly suggesting to himself, and thus the great force of auto-suggestion to his own detriment, that he should remain in the background, lest he be criticized, as if the criticism would do any damage or defeat his purpose. Here's another man born of poor parents. Since the day that he can remember, he has seen evidence of poverty. He has heard talk of poverty. He has felt the icy hand of poverty on his shoulders, and it has so impressed him that he fixes it in his mind as a curse to which he must submit. Quite unconsciously, he permits himself to fall victim of the belief that one's poor, always poor, one's poor, always poor. Until that belief becomes the dominating thought in his mind, he resembles a horse that has been harnessed and broken until it forgets it has the potential power with which to throw off that harness. Auto-suggestion is rapidly regulating him to the back of the stage of life. Finally, he becomes a quitter. Ambition is gone. Opportunity comes his way no longer. And if he does, he has not the vision to see it. He has accepted his fate. It is a well-established fact that the faculties of the mind, like the limbs of the body, atrophy and wither away if not used. Self-confidence is no exception. It develops when used, but disappears if not. One of the chief disadvantages of inherited wealth is the fact that it too often leads to inaction and loss of self-confidence. Some years ago, a boy was born to E.B. McLean in the city of Washington. His inheritance, this is a good one. This is a sad one, but it's a good one. His inheritance was said to be around $100 million at the turn of the century. While this baby was taken from its airing in its carriage, was taken for an airing. We'd say taken for a ride, right? When this baby was taken for an airing in its carriage, it was surrounded by nurses and assistant nurses and detectives and other servants whose duty was to see that no harm befell him. As the years passed, by this same vigilance was kept up. This child did not have to dress himself. He had servants who did that. Servants watched over him while he slept and while he was at play. He was not permitted to do anything that a servant could do for him. He had grown to the age of 10. One day he was playing in the yard and noticed that the back gate had been left open. In all his life, he had never been outside the gate alone. And naturally, that was just the thing he wished to do. During a moment when the servants were not looking, he dashed out the gate and was run down and killed by an automobile before he could reach the middle of the street. He had used his servants' eyes until his own no longer served him, as they might have done had he learned to rely upon them. 20 years ago, a man whom I served as secretary sent his two sons away to school. One of them went to the University of Virginia and the other to a college in New York. Each month, it was part of my task to make out a check for $100 for each of these boys, as was their pin. This was their pin, pin money to be spent as they wished. How profitable, I remember the way I envied those boys as I made out those checks each month. I often wondered why the hand of fate bore me into the world of poverty. I could look ahead and see how these boys would raise to the high stations in life while I remained a humble clerk. In due time, the boys returned home with their sheepskins. Their father was a wealthy man who owned banks and railroads and coal mines and other businesses, other property of great value. Good positions were waiting for the boys in their father's employ. But 20 years of time can play cruel tricks on those who have never had to struggle. Perhaps a better way to state the truth would be that time gives those who have never had to struggle a chance to play cruel tricks on themselves. At any rate, the two boys brought home from school other things besides their sheepskins. They came back with well-developed capacities for strong drink, capacities which they developed because $100 with each of them, which each of them received each month, made it unnecessary for them to struggle. There is a long and sad story, the details of which will not interest you, but you will be interested in their fini. As this lesson is being written, I have on my desk a copy of the newspaper published in the town where those boys lived. Their father has been bankrupted, and his costly mansion, where the boys were born, has been placed on the block for sale. One of the boys died of delirium tremens, and the other one is in an insane asylum. Not all rich men's sons turned out so, unfortunately, but the fact remains, nevertheless, that inaction leads to atrophy, and this, in turn, leads to loss of ambition and self-confidence. And without these essential qualities, a man will be carried through life on the wings of uncertainty, just as a dry leaf can be carried here and there on the bosom of stray winds. Far from being a disadvantage, struggle is a decided advantage because it develops those qualities which would forever lie dormant without it. Many a man has found his place in the world because of having been forced to struggle for the existence early in life. Lack of knowledge of the advantages occurring from struggle has prompted many a parent to say, I had to work hard when I was young, but I shall see that my children have an easy time. Poor, foolish creatures. An easy time usually turns out to be a greater handicap than the average young man or woman can survive. There are worse things in this world than being forced to work in early life. Forced idleness is far worse than forced labor. Being forced to work and forced to do your best will breed in you temperance and self-control and strength of will and content and 100 other virtues which the idle will never know. Okay, this is good stuff. Not only does the lack of necessity for struggle lead to the willingness of ambition and willpower, but lead to a weakness of ambition and willpower, but What is more dangerous still is it sets up in the person's mind a state of lethargy that leads to the loss of self-confidence. The person who has quit struggling because effort is no longer necessary is literally applying the principle of autosuggestion in undermining his own power of self-confidence. Such a person will finally drift into a frame of mind in which he will actually look more or less contempt upon the person who is forced to carry on. The human mind, if you pardon repetition, may be likened to an electric battery. It may be a positive or it may be negative. Self-confidence is the quality with which the mind is recharged and made positive. Let us apply a line of reasoning to salesmanship and see what part of self-confidence plays in this great field of endeavor. One of the greatest salesmen this country has ever seen was once a clerk in a newspaper office. It'll be worth your while to analyze the method through which he gained his title as the world's leading salesman. He was a timid young man with a more or less retiring sort of nature. He was one of those people one of those who believe it best to slip in the back door and take a seat at the rear of the stage of life. One evening he heard a lecture on the subject of this lesson, self-confidence. And that lecture so impressed him that he left the lecture hall with a firm determination to pull himself out of the rut into which he had drifted. He went to the business manager of the paper and, oh, this is great, and asked for a position of solicitor of advertising and was put to work on a commission basis. Everyone in the office expected him to fail. As this sort of salesmanship calls for more positive type of sales ability. He went to his room and made a list of a certain type of merchants on whom he intended to call. One would think that he would naturally have made up a list of names of those whom he believed he could sell with the least effort, but he did nothing of the sort. He placed on his list only the names of merchants whom other advertising solicitors had called on without making a sale. His list consisted of only 12 names. Before he made a single call, he went out to the city park, took out the list of 12 names, read it over 100 times, saying to himself, "You will purchase advertising space from me before the end of the month. You will purchase advertising space from me before the end of the month. You will purchase advertising space before the end of the month," and 97 more times. He began to make his calls. The first day he closed sales with three of the 12 impossibilities. During the remainder of the week, he made sales on 2 others. By the end of the month, he opened advertising accounts on all but one of the merchants he had on the list. For the ensuing month, he made no sales, for the reason that he made no calls except on this one obstinate merchant. Every morning when the store opened, he was on hand to interview this merchant, and every morning the merchant said no. The merchant knew he was not going to buy advertising space, but the young man didn't know it. When the merchant said no, the young man did not hear it, but he kept right on coming. On the last day of the month, after having told this persistent young man no for 30 consecutive times, the merchant said, "Look here, young man, you have wasted a whole month trying to sell me. Now, what I would like to know is this: why have you wasted your time?" "Wasted my time? Nothing," he retorted. "I've been going to school and you have been my teacher. Now I know all of the arguments that a merchant can bring up for not buying. And besides that, I have been drilling myself in self-confidence." Then the merchant said, "I'll make a little confession of my own. I too have been going to school, and you have been my teacher. You have taught me a lesson in persistence that is worth money to me. And to show you my appreciation, I'm going to pay my tuition fee by giving you an order for advertising space." Oh, I love that story. And that was the way in which the Philadelphia, North America's best advertising account was brought in. The best 30 consecutive days of no, the best advertising account was brought in. Likewise, it marked the beginning of a reputation that has made the same young man a millionaire. He succeeded because he deliberately charged his own mind with sufficient self-confidence to make that mind an irresistible force. When he sat down to make a list of the 12 names, he did something that 99%, 99 people out of 100 would not have done. He selected names of those whom he believed would be hard to sell because he understood that out of resistance, he would meet with the trying, he would meet within trying to sell them. Because he understood out of the resistance he would meet within trying to sell them would come strength and self-confidence. He was one of the very few people who understood that all rivers and some men are crooked because of following the line of least resistance. We're going to end there. Questions, comments, thoughts? Takeaways. So you see this book, right? So some of you have this book. We're moving stuff out of the sheds, the warehouses, mini warehouses. That's another Napoleon Hill book. This one was after this book. This one is, this is more about the formulas and the science and the feelings. Kind of amazing. It's a heavy book. Questions, comments, thoughts on what we just covered? Hi, Dub Dub. Hi, Dub Dub. Are you my Dub Dub? Wow. Come on. Hi. You good boy? Say hi to everybody. Hi.
Sean, I'm just amazed that for 30 days straight,
Yep.
like that is persistent.
Yep. In 30 days, not 300, right? Not 999 times Edison, not 126 publishers, 126, 128 publishers of the Chicken Soup for the Soul, the Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen series.
I just think like after three, I'm like,
Well, so here's the thing. So I'm going to go to this book now. So let me share with you. One of the first things it talks about is a very simple formula. Write this down. RRAA. Everybody write that down. RRAA. How to recognize, relate, assimilate, and apply. Recognize, relate, assimilate, and apply, or action. So the reason the R squared, the R2A2, right? R squared, RR, recognize, relate, assimilate, and action. So here's an example. I recognize the principle, the idea, or the technique that is being used. So what was the idea, technique, or principle being used? Persistence. It helped someone else. I can see the results. It will work for me if I use it. That's for me. So recognize the persistence, relate it, right? We're going to relate it to the salesman who wanted to write down the 12 names. Ask yourself, what will this success principle, idea, or technique do for me? Important. You must relate it to yourself, right? It's a question that I ask. What identity? Who do you become when this happens? When you let that go or you grab onto that? Who do you become? How does it relate to you? So relate it to yourself. You must relate it to yourself. Start with the most important living person as far as you're concerned. You. Assimilate. How can I use principles, ideas, or problems How can I techniques? How can I use principles, ideas, or techniques to achieve my goals or solve my problems? How can I absorb them into my behavior so that they become a part of me? How can I develop a success habit, a success reflex, so that the right thing will be done? How do you assimilate persistence into your day? This is the rewire. This is the auto suggestion. This is self talk. This is brain talk. This is neuroencoding. This is the Nest program. And then action. When am I going to use it? So when can you, Roz, become persistent? No need to respond, but when can you decide that you're going to be persistent, consistent, and do it day in, day out, day in, day out? When am I going to use it? When am I going to start? Ask yourself this important question and then follow through with the self-starter. Do it now. Yes, do it now. So recognize, relate, assimilate, and action. The R2A2 formula should become so ingrained in your mind that you can recognize success. Yes, Dubby, I know. I'm telling them this is good stuff, isn't it? You can recognize success principles, ideas, or techniques from listening to a sermon, reading a newspaper or magazine article, or reading a self-help book, or listening to an inspirational recording, or by studying the lives of great men or many other sources. Remember, develop and use your own success reflex. That's for me. Isn't that cool? I love this stuff. I think he'll got a lot of things right. Questions, comments, thoughts? Going once?
Sean, the one thing that really hit me too was the the persistence for sure, but along with that, the consistency, and then what the results are. And I love how they said, um, um, forget exactly what the line was, but the the rest of the impossibilities.
Right. Well, when he wrote down the list of the 12 impossibilities, he had already sold 11 of them
Right.
in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So here's the question for all. Did he listen carefully to the question, see if it sinks in differently. Did he get rejected 30 days in a row? I know what it says. I want you to expand your awareness of possibilities. Did he really get rejected 30 days in a row?
Well,
Or
no,
did he find
he had some responses that were positive.
No, I'm talking about this one guy.
Oh,
Or did he try 29 times, it didn't work, and he got rejected with 29 different ways that did not work? So he only got rejected once a day. That didn't work, try something new. That didn't work, try something new. So he only got rejected once. He knew he wasn't. The reason that we struggle, I believe, a lot of people struggle, is they go back with the same method or the same way, the same doing things in a certain way. They don't shift that. They just do the certain things. And the rejection comes from, I keep trying the same thing over and over, expecting different results, right? Insanity. He tried 29 new ways and then only got rejected one day. Each day he got rejected. 29 different ways that don't work. He learned his lesson every time. Then he tried one way. And the biggest lesson he got was, you're not making me feel bad. You're my teacher.
It's like Edison and the light bulb.
And that's not, could you imagine 9,000 times, 10,000 times?
Yeah. That's really persistence.
Talk about somebody who thinks you're nut job. You've been trying that for decades, for months, years.
But isn't it that mindset that you are going to find what works?
Well, what if you shifted? What if you shifted your thought process of, I'm going to find 100 ways to prospect that don't work? What if I told you could get paid 10 grand a month to go find 200 ways to prospect that do not work and write a book? You'll make money from the book, but you will become a multi-millionaire if you come up with the list of 200 things that don't work.
Yeah, because people don't have to go through those 200 times.
And now you already know how to do it, and now they still have to learn how to do the one thing the right way, but you already know how to do that. So not only are you capitalizing from your experience, people are now going to pay to avoid the experience that you just went through. And here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, all of you have an experience that somebody would not want to go through. And you're keeping it a secret. Just saying.
Yep. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome, welcome, welcome. Tomorrow's episode 2 of Put Some Ranch on It drops. So that's kind of cool. Thank you for everybody who's gone and left some comments. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate that. If you haven't, you can go to Spotify, Put Some Ranch on It, and search for that and listen to the comments or listen to the audio and then make a comment. If you want, wait till tomorrow and go and listen to both of them because they'll both be up then. They release each Wednesday. So yeah, Michelle is getting excited about it. I'm excited about it. And yeah, it's some fun. Cool stuff. Funny to think that just 2 weeks ago, it was a concept and now the second episode is coming. So we have another episode in the can. We've got to get a couple more in the can because we're starting to get hip campers coming. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. So lots of things going on. Who else? Any else? Thoughts, comments, questions, takeaways? Tomorrow we are having our morning call, Wednesday, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So anyone else? Thoughts, comments, questions, takeaways? Okay. Y'all have an amazing what is today? The holiday messes up. Tuesday. Taco Tuesday? Is it Tuesday? Yes. So Taco Tuesday. So no call tomorrow night. We're just gonna do this once a week and allow yourselves to have some time to work on your stuff. So Monday night, I missed it last night because I had a holiday, just messed me up. And what else? Yeah, we'll see you all tomorrow morning. I love you tons. I appreciate you. I'm your head brain training. Let's scramble to find what works misfit. I'll see y'all where?
At the next
At the
event.
next event.
I love it, love it, love it. All right, everybody. We'll see you in the morning.
All
Thank you,
right.